Welcome to Beyond Talking Points from Little Visionaries Bookstore. I'm Bridgitte Jackson-Buckley, and today I'm speaking with Kiersten Parsons-Hathcock. To most who know her, Kiersten is a Shark Tank winning, self-taught carpenter and furniture designer who defied the odds and built an internationally known furniture company out of her garage. But what most don't know is she's also an ordinary woman who was thrown into extraordinary circumstances. At the age of 36, Kiersten suddenly began to see and hear the voices of deceased children in spirit. It was later discovered the kids weren't simply coming to her to deliver messages. They were coming to save her life. Kiersten joins us to discuss her intuitive awakening, which led to partnerships with detectives around the country and a traditional publishing deal for her soon-to-be-released memoir, Little Voices: How Kids in Spirit Helped a Reluctant Medium Escape and Heal from Abuse. Welcome, Kiersten.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. This is just going to be a great conversation. Okay, so a lot has happened to you.
Yes.
You have been through a lot. Okay, so where I want to start is for you to maybe just walk us up to what you were doing before you started to hear the little voices. What was life like? Like, were you interested in spirituality? Were you deep in that? Like, what was going on?
Sure. Yeah, I was not the poster child for spirituality at all. In fact, I was just a regular mom. I had 2 kids. I was building a furniture company out of our garage in Los Angeles. My life consisted of going to Target and spending too much money. You know, like it was just a very ordinary type life. I had no interest, honestly, in spirituality. I didn't believe in psychics or mediums. I had no interest in really diving into any of that. I believed, I think innately, that there was a higher power, but you know, none of that was indoctrinated in me as a child because we didn't regularly go to church or anything like that. So yeah, that was me. I was just working in my garage building a furniture company, and I had at the time, 4-year-old and a 10-year-old. So yeah.
Okay, so you were, so tell us the story of you starting the furniture company, because you had worked in a traditional profession, left that, and then you jumped into your creative abilities.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so talk to us about that.
Okay, sure. So, you know, I grew up in Ohio. My parents are teachers, and my dad was a football coach. I lived a very grounded Midwestern life. And I went to college at Ohio University. I got a communications degree. I was always very driven. Like I knew immediately I wanted to go out into the world and get a job where I got to wear a suit and carry a briefcase. And so I worked throughout the years. I worked for A&E and the History Channel in marketing. I was in integrated marketing for them. I worked for, training and ed companies. I was kind of all over the board, but everything had conduit, or everything had commonality in marketing and communications. So I taught myself graphic design. I, was able to do all of this creative stuff within the, under the umbrella of communications. We ended up moving from Chicago, the Chicago area, to Los Angeles. And it was at that point I had a tiny baby and also, a preschooler who was just starting. And I thought, I don't want to put them in daycare again. I don't want to go through all of this again, because we had moved quite a bit throughout both of my husband and my career. So I just figured, you know what, I need to make a change, and I want to make a change. I want to figure out how I can work from home. So I did all kinds of random stuff. I was a nanny for a little while. The furniture idea came because we needed toy storage, basically. So we were just your typical family living in a very small house in Sherman Oaks. And I thought, okay, we need toy storage, but I kind of like that mid-century modern style. And I couldn't find anything on the market. And honestly, when I really dug in, there was one company making mid-century modern stuff. So that was the light bulb moment. And now I can look back and think, oh, well, that was intuition. But, at the time, I just thought, oh, look how smart I am, coming up with this idea. So I just started tinkering. I bought a table saw. I thought, if I can do this and not kill myself in the process or, cut a finger off, I think there's something here, because so many people in the Los Angeles area like that style. And that's what I did. I taught myself to build furniture off of Google. And
that is amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I can relate to the part of your story where you had small children and you didn't want to go the daycare route again. Totally can relate to that. And you're sitting there, you're like, okay, we have bills, we need to eat. We like food. What can I do?
Right.
So it's nice to hear that you paid attention to what was coming through you, because oftentimes we in those questions, what can I do? Like, where should I go? To whom should I speak? And the answers are coming, but you have to be able to receive them,
right.
Attention to them. Okay, so if I understand correctly, you didn't even know how to use a tool.
No, not really. No, my dad used to build, we didn't grow up wealthy or anything. So my dad used to build a lot of our furniture out of like old bleacher boards, because he was the football coach. Right. So we had, coffee table that is still probably to this day, will forever, for hundreds of years, be a coffee table that someone can use.
Okay. That's
so,
sturdy.
So I was around carpentry, but I never had any interest in it. I was your typical high school kid. I had more interest in running track and, meeting boys and doing all the stuff you do as a high schooler. So I didn't grow up knowing how to do it, but I grew up around it. And my parents were very much, I adore them. They very much said throughout my entire childhood, you can do anything you want to do, no matter what. Whether you're a girl and, doing something in a traditionally male industry, you can do it. So I think I really credit them for that foundation, for giving me the faith in myself. Because once the idea came through, and I felt intuitively, I very much felt a calm about me, which is how I knew it was the right move to try and do this. Everyone else around me was saying, that's crazy. Kiersten, you're in television marketing. What are you doing trying to figure out how to build not just build something to have in your house, but build an actual furniture brand? So I've heard it all throughout the years. But the intuitive part of me just kept saying, no, keep going. And I'm really glad that I did.
Yeah, but isn't that the case? Where you're either saying, I'm really glad I listened, or I should have listened.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, one of two.
Yeah.
So that, when you explain it in an interview, it's like 5 minutes of, I started a company. But that's a major accomplishment, because you didn't know how to use any of the tools. So that means hours of research.
Yes.
In the midst of dealing with children, learning which tools you had to use, how to use the tools, how to assemble, how to get everything to people and find people. That's a tremendous amount of work.
Yeah, absolutely.
That led to someone contacted you and said, you should try out for Shark Tank.
Yes. It was my dad, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, It was my dad. He called me up one day, and I had been building for about 4 years at that point. So a lot of my success actually just came from word of mouth. So, people were finding out about my furniture. They liked the way I designed the website, and it took off. New York magazines were writing about my little tiny garage operation. And I suddenly started building and shipping things all over the world, which was pretty crazy. So that's the point where, I think 17, like retailers from 17 different countries were reaching out to me. And it was at that point that, I was buried. I had to find manufacturing. I needed to scale and grow the company, but how do I get from here to there? And my dad called and said, hey, there's this new show called Shark Tank. And he explained it. And my first reaction was, there's no way I'm doing that. There's no way.
Yeah.
This is terrifying. Like, why would I put myself in that position to fall flat on my face on national TV? And then, intuition, it got me. So I sat on it for a little bit.
Between the no and the okay, what happened?
I think at that point, again, I'm still not really I wasn't channeling children or anything. And I think there was an innate knowledge that calm feeling that I had was the same. Like at first there was fear because my ego took over. What if I make a fool of myself? Right. But then when I got through like 10 minutes of that, so I'm just piddling around the house, I go back out into the garage, I'm thinking about my conversation with my dad, and it made sound business. It was sound business advice, and it was something that I definitely should have done, so I put my business hat on. And then once I got, through the fear, I thought, yeah, I got to do this. I have to do it.
So it's like the egotistic response is like, I'm going to embarrass myself. I don't know what I'm doing. People will be looking at me.
Right.
Then the intuitive spirit connective side is consistent. There's something here for you. And did you feel curious about it?
I did feel curious. And I also, having had a background in marketing, I knew immediately that my story would be a story that they would want to put on TV. I'm a mom in a garage. I live locally. They don't even have to, send a crew across the country to do any kind of, in-person shoots. So I knew that I had a good shot. But honestly, I think there were 40 of us that actually pitched in front of the Sharks. And during that second season, it was 2011, there were 12 of us that aired, I think, because of, how it works with television episodes. So it's pretty cool. I mean, it's meant to be, that's for sure. That was meant to be.
Well, I asked, were you curious? Because I know, when I'm feeling, one of my signs to kind of move in that direction is I will be very curious about it. I mean, I could have fear, but it is that calm, consistent, like it doesn't go away. And I'm like, how could it work? Like, what would happen if I did it? It's like, I don't know. I'm thinking of like a fishing line and a fish bait, go this direction.
I agree completely. And, that was the thing that actually helped me as I started to open up as a medium. That was the thing that helped me know that it was real, because I could look back on, well, that moment with Shark Tank, I did feel scared, but then I felt calm. Okay, that moment with whatever, I felt scared, but calm. So I was able, and I'm very much a scientific person. I have always relied on empirical research data. I am a researcher at heart. So that appealed to me because I could actually sort of track it. And then, of course, it took validation from cops and grieving families saying, how do you know this stuff? How could you possibly know this? Nobody knows this. For me to believe in it. But the calm part was the part I needed in order to reach out to those folks.
I like that a lot, that there is this element of feeling calm around it, because it seems like it would help you know that even if you don't get the intended or desired out, there's still something for you to go because it's right in front of you. There's something for you in this experience.
Right. And it's not to say that, I have had freak out moments, especially in the beginning when I was, being like the kids were saying, please reach out to my parents, please reach out. And I talk about one of those stories in the book, one of the first kids that came to me. Remember him? Yeah. And I freaked out and I took all the notes down and then I shoved him away, and put it by my bedside table and in the little drawer and was like, I can't deal with this right now.
Let's just take, so I wanted to get your history prior. So everything was moving along. You were going through Shark Tank.
Yep.
You had not heard the voices at this point, or you had?
I actually had. So I filmed Shark Tank in 2010, and it was towards the end. My spiritual awakening actually started on 9/9/09. And I remember that because it's my birthday and I was turning 36. So if you're into numerology, anyone who's listening or watching, that's a big thing.
Charts.
Yes, exactly. I had no idea what any of that meant. I just, I was led to where I was supposed to go. And it was that year, it was everything sort of coming together. I was kind of trying to understand my life and why I still felt this gray. There was just this gray that kind of, I was looking at everything in my life and thinking, I love my family. I love my kids. I love, I love what I'm doing. Everything seems really awesome and exciting, but there's this weird off gray feeling. And I couldn't put my finger on it. So it was actually that particular day, I had never seen a psychic or a medium, but I decided I'm going to see someone. I drive past her every day, taking the kids to daycare or taking them to school. And I want to find out just to see. I don't know if I believe this, but just to see. And it blew me away. Absolutely.
So the gray felt like something's missing or not right, or
yeah, I just couldn't figure out why I felt down.
Yeah.
And why, everything should have, like, if I equate it to what, I'm looking at, everything should have been technicolor looking, in my life, like so many great things were happening. But I would sort of wake up every morning and kind of look out into the world and just feel kind of like,
Okay.
And
so you went to see a psychic.
Went to see a psychic, and she basically told me stuff that she couldn't have known. And then she proceeded to say, you're here, you have gifts like I do, but you're not going to, hang a shingle and open up a shop like I have. But you will be writing books. You're going to help millions of children, but there's a lot of healing that you have to do first. So I walked out of that and I thought, okay, I believe in her because of what she told me that she couldn't possibly know. But I also still, putting my scientific mind on, thought, this is crazy. I'm making like high priced kids furniture in my garage. How am I going to help millions of children, with a really nice toy box? Like, I had no idea. So what she couldn't tell me, and what, I found that Spirit wasn't saying, were the things that I would eventually start to learn through the journey.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what,
there's that piece.
There's that
where
piece.
They're looking at the potential energy, everything that's there, and they're telling you, but at the same time, they're not telling you.
Right. So, yes. So by the time I got on Shark Tank, I was hearing and seeing, and that, I felt like an undercover medium, it was like a bad Lifetime title, movie title. I felt very strange because here I am living this Shark Tank life, and everyone's wanting to talk to me about my furniture brand and how it's, was growing internationally. And I am quietly, secretly, working on cases that involve children that have been killed by pedophiles.
So Kiersten, what was what was the first time that you heard a little voice?
So it happened.
What were you doing?
Yeah, well, several things. Once I was in the kitchen and I heard a little voice, and I saw a flash go across my kitchen, right? Uh-huh. So I thought, okay, that's weird. And then you just brush it off, right? And then there was the smoke smell. And I thought, okay, there's a smoke smell. Where's this coming from? Looking around, is it outside? Is it not? But man, that reminds me so much of my grandma. My grandma used to smoke this particular brand of, cigarettes, right? That I identified with. Then it ramped up because I think, they knew, as scientific and as buried in my brain, that I had to be hit over the head. So it started subtly as to not make me think I was totally crazy. But then all of a sudden I am seeing children walk through the living room. I am in the garage and I'm hearing mom, and my kids are at school. I'm working on a toy box, right? And the nail, there's a nail sitting next to me because I'm just pounding away. And then I stop to go get something and I see it moving across the workbench, just moving on its own. There was, nothing around it to make it move. It got weird. It got really weird. And that was, those were the kids kind of coming around me to say, hey, we're here. But it really wasn't until the child that I talked about, his name is Nate, and you remember from the book that he came in, that I really had to step into it. And I had to make a decision. Is this something I want in my life? And do I want to help them?
Yes.
Or do I want to just push this aside?
So, wow. Okay. So we have something for the astrologers who are listening. This was most likely in your birth chart and your pre-birth planning. It sounds like your third eye just opened up.
It did. It did.
Okay. So, because if you're seeing clairvoyance, right? And you can hear the clairaudience. That's amazing. And so Spirit will come through in subtle way as to not scare you.
Yes. And, and I should back up because there was a point that I ended up looking into something called Reiki healing, which a lot of people who listen will probably know.
Yeah.
And I looked into that because I had a friend that said, hey, I think this will help with your daughter, Nat. And And then had done everything we could to help her with her anxiety and depression. And so I finally thought, you know what, I'll look into it. Let's see. And once I looked into it, I thought, well, okay, I'll try. It's something I can do. I feel like I'm helping my child. So I learned Reiki, and then I would work on her a little, not often, but it really looked like at one point that, I was being more affected than she was. And I think that coupling the Reiki opening and opening myself up that way, in addition to what was in my birth chart clearly and the blueprint of my life, those two things combined is what made it come on as quickly and as forcefully, I guess, as it did.
Well, it could sound a little and maybe I don't know, scary to some people, but you write about it in a way in the book where you really walk us through the nail moving, hearing the voices, and it doesn't feel scary. The only part that I was like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen was when you went to your friend's house.
Yes.
And you were getting some information that there was something at the house that needed to be uncovered. That was so interesting.
Yes, that was scary. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Like every time I would go visit her, I would have I'd be sleeping and my toes would be pulled on at night. So again, this was all during that same time period where I'm starting to see and hear, but not putting it all together. And so I would go back to visit her because she lives in another state, and other weird things would happen. And then finally, it did get to the point once I understood and I reached out to Nate's parents, and, I was starting to understand, okay, this is not the polyurethane I've been breathing all of these years building furniture. This is actually very real. When Carrie came in, a particular little girl who was basically kidnapped and murdered in the 70s, when she came in to give me information, I knew, in my heart and soul, I had to do everything I could to help her. And it just happened to be, at my friend Kelly's house.
But it's like, what are the odds? It's just amazing how things happen. But, I like your story a lot because, sometimes these experiences, people may think, mainstream opinion may be that, oh, well, that kind of stuff happens to people who meditate or in ashrams. But you are a very relatable woman. Your experiences, we have children, we care for children, we love our husbands, all of that has come through you in a way that can be received by so many people who might not necessarily pay attention or even be willing to hear this type of information.
Thank you.
We live in a spiritual world having a physical experience, and it's very clear that it would just come you. You're using a hammer and a nail.
Right.
That is grounded as
it's pretty
as
grounded.
You can be, like, you're pounding stuff, and then this completely new element moving through you. It's just so interesting. So how did your family deal with this?
Thank goodness. My husband has always been really supportive of me. There were definitely times when he was saying, even with Mod Mom, are you sure, Kiersten? Like, I believe in you, and you can do anything you put your mind to. But are you sure? That was just furniture, right? So imagine what this is like. And I know it was scary for him. As far as my kids go, what was interesting is that Nat, who was our oldest, and in the book, she is referred to as Noah because she's now transgender and came out a couple of years ago. So, and at the time, Noah was seeing the same types of things walk through our house. And the only reason I knew that wasn't like, Noah was telling me that, but we would both do this. And I would notice that Noah and I were the only ones in the room, if we're all watching TV and we see something for us. So in a way, that was a lifeline for me because I knew that she could see. And then as I ramped up, Yeah, as I ramped up and I started to really understand it, and I dove in and I started talking to other people and, really did a lot of research. Google has been my best friend through my entire career, no matter if I'm building furniture or if I'm helping, children who are deceased. So I started Googling, and honestly, I promise I'm not getting paid by Google to say that, but
Yeah.
I just started researching, and the more I started to believe in what I was receiving, and the more my husband started to see, like, holy crap, this is real, the more it actually opened him up too. So I remember being in, we'd be in bed, and I remember looking over into the corner and seeing her, this girl with long dark hair, but I didn't want to say anything. And then Scott said, "Do you see her in the corner by the door?"
So he saw her.
Yeah. And it doesn't happen often with him, because I think his intuition, he's very much a visionary type person. His intuition comes in different ways, and obviously this is part of how it's supposed to come in for me. Yeah. But I'm so grateful that he is supportive, and that my kids are supportive, and that, all of this started in 2009, right? So we're looking at, we're in 2022 now. So I've been able to help.
13 years.
Yeah, long time ago. I've been able to sort of help steer them and other kids as well. And, trust that intuition, but also here are some things that you can do to help create some boundaries and things like that, and I like that has helped, because I think they're into, like my intuition, your intuition, it's a roadmap for life. That's how I look at it.
I totally agree. Okay, so yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I'm happy to hear that you had support, because it can be, you can feel lonely,
Yes.
no one to talk to or even to relate. Very, very fortunate for you. So was it all the time, like 24 hours, like no, like you're just seeing spirits around you all the time and hearing them, or was it a certain period?
No, it was, thank goodness. It did get very overwhelming though. At one point, we were living in Los Angeles still. It would have been 2012. And it was right before we moved to Flagstaff. And I just remember I would look out and see the sea of spirit in the backyard. And I believe the reason that happened is because in my Googling and in my adventures, right, I end up understanding that some of these kids and some of these people hadn't actually crossed into the light yet, and they needed help doing that. Some of the kids that came to me had committed suicide, and in their lifetime they believed that they would go to hell for what they did. And so I would explain, no, honey, there is no hell. I promise you that is not the case. And then I would open up like a light door or sort of a window for them. And again, I Googled how to do that. It's out there.
You had to figure out how to.
I had to figure out how to do that. So once that got around, it was kind of like, oh, she could do this. She does this, Then it kind of became like a train station stop. And so
I see, the spirits really started. But okay, so how did you know the information that you were finding was actually helpful, truthful information? Because there's so much information.
I know.
How did you discern what to take?
Well, again, intuition and trial and error. And I think, as with everything that I have done throughout the last 13 years, part of what I relied on was being led to these things. So I channel a lot when I read. I channel a lot. Like if I'm watching television and there's they're doing a profile on somebody who was murdered. Back in the day, it wouldn't matter. Like if I had to set up boundaries basically, or else they would immediately come to me. And and I'm sitting there saying, I can't just go to every sheriff's department around the country. Like, I understand, I believe I understand what my job is here. And I'm going to have to set up some boundaries that say only those that are for my highest good are allowed in. Because I think there is a little bit of, she can see, please, and I don't blame them. They want to get their messages out, but it can't overtake my human life. And it can't overtake my time that I spend with my kids, and that was tough. It was tough to learn because I wanted to help,
Okay, so let me be clear. Okay.
Yes.
So it's almost like, the way I understand it, let's say like if you have a football stadium that is dark and you're went on. And once the light goes on, it is visible.
Yes.
And so anyone around looking for light can see Kiersten now in this
Yes.
world, as far as children. Okay, and so then through your research, you looked for information, you were intuitively led to helpful information, you had some trial and error, and you also read books. You learned that you needed to put boundaries in place. You wouldn't be completely overrun, because it would just be like the floodgates.
Yes.
So you have to have some kind of boundary in place. Okay, so then when you were getting information that they wanted to relay, were you seeing and feeling their experience? Or were they simply telling you what happened? And
No.
that's what they wanted you to relay to let their parents, or not, or what did they want?
Yeah, so it's different per each kid.
Okay.
And it actually
Okay.
is different in the way that I experience their messages per child or per young adult too. So it's not the same every time. And in the beginning though, I did have to, again, learn another boundary, because sometimes they would make, like if they were strangled, they would make me feel that. And I would have to say, okay, okay, thank you. I understand. Thank you. So I started saying, can you show me, instead of make me feel this? And so I actually had to kind of take the reins a little bit, because it's terrifying sometimes, to feel as if you're in that position.
Yeah.
And
so the show me was an image then.
Yeah. So now, I still see spirit out here, like, out, like if they were out in this room, I would see them out here, but I also see them a lot in like a movie, So for example, the other day, Nate came back in and he wanted me to share a message with his parents. And so I said, sure. And one of those messages, he was showing me an image. It was at the same time, he was showing me an image of himself in a Camaro, and he's backing out of the, I could tell he's backing out because he put his hand here. He was like backing out. And the song was driving in your car, turn on the radio. Do you remember that song? Okay. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because Nate died when he was 13. So, but he was showing me, himself in the car. So I reached back out to his mom and I said, okay, so I'm just going to pass this, because, I do have a tendency to want to try and put it all together, all the pieces, but here's what he's showing me. And I told her about the song, and she said, well, maybe he's going to turn the radio on like he does sometimes, while we're heading over to the cemetery. And I said, yeah, maybe that's it. She said, hold on, let me talk to John. Let me talk to Nate's dad. John comes back and says, are you kidding me? I've been hearing that song in my head for 2 weeks. Wow. 2 weeks. So it's interesting because, I think the Camaro part, that had to do with the time frame of the song. It was an 80s song. He probably always wanted a Camaro, like it was just, one of those things that they can very quickly give me information on all fronts at the same time.
How do you even know where to begin to contact the parents?
Yeah.
The child in spirit. How do you even, what do you do?
So that had been tricky. But I also, back in 2012, I started a nonprofit, which is no longer in existence, but I am part of a new nonprofit that I'll mention later. But that nonprofit, I just put it out into the universe, and I trusted that the kids would guide their parents to me. And what was amazing about that, it was called the Little Light Project. And so my whole thing was I was going to put it out there, and I didn't ever do anything one-on-one like this. I just would set aside time every week where I would channel messages and I would write them all down. And then the parents, whoever's guided to my website, they could basically give me their information, their name, who their child is. And if that child came to me, then I would reach back out to them and give them those messages. So that's how I operated. It was kind of a training ground thing for me. And it was also safe, it felt safer. And so some of the parents got messages that way. Other parents I knew, or kind of knew, there was some connection. There was an ability to get to them through someone else, which I also don't believe is a coincidence. Yeah. As far as the detectives that I work with around the country, that was also intuitively led, and there was a connection. There was one removed from, or this person's husband is a cop in San Francisco, or the cop I work with in New York who started the new nonprofit with me. His name's Mark Pucci. He's a detective. He's retired NYPD, but he's a PI and has been for a while now. And we met because we both volunteered to work on a missing persons case. And I happened to be friends with the woman whose best friend's husband went missing. I hope that made sense.
Yeah.
And then Mark happened to know about this case and said, I'll take this on pro bono, because he felt so horrible for he's a very feeling, awesome guy, intuitive detective. So that's how we met. It had nothing to do with the child, but that's how we got started.
Synchronicity.
Yes, it is.
That's a perfect synchronicity. Okay, so you consider yourself as being a medium, right?
Yeah, I would definitely say I'm a medium.
But it sounds like, you're saying, so are you simply seeing the images? Well, not simply, but like, how is the is there ever misinterpretation or possibility? Because when energy's coming through, interpret it. So
yes.
How are you keeping yourself clear to make sure you're not misinterpreting?
So a lot of that had to do with kind of understanding how I'm receiving information, and a lot of things I was able to sort of put together, right? So like just as simple even as chills coming in on one side, for me, it means that person is on the other side and has gone through into the light. Chills on my right side, however, it means that they have not gone into the light and they might need help crossing. So I've been able to kind of put together match together different clues that have helped with some very basic information, right, as they come in. But mostly I've had to tame my conscious mind and my detective mind and say, don't try and figure this out. Just let it come in.
Yeah.
And then pass it back the same way, because that's the hardest part, because it can seem like it's extremely, I could be like, oh, well, that seems like it all goes together, when that's not the intention at all.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's why I asked about that.
Yeah. It's crazy, the types of messages I'll get. And I typically say, well, they're saying this. Does that feel like anything that resonates?
Yeah, like you just have to say verbatim what they're saying. Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So we're up until the point where you're now working with Mark Pucci.
Yes.
A highly intuitive police detective, a synchronistic meeting. And then like things at some point start to go off the rails a little bit for you.
Yeah, they do.
And this is where the kids came in to help save your life.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about what happened.
Sure. Yes. So I was of course wondering this whole time, not all the kids that came to me were abused sexually as children, but there was a pattern. Many of them were, and many of them were killed by predators. So naturally I'm thinking, okay, I have a kids furniture company. I love children. I was a nanny. I have 2 kids of my own. Maybe this is why. Maybe because I have this, kind of mom personality is why they're coming to me. Well, what ended up happening is in late 2013, I started having visions of myself being raped and sexually abused by a distant uncle of mine. Okay. And had I not had the experience and the validation of the 2 years prior in working with cops and working with families and understanding that what I'm seeing is real, I would have dismissed it. I would not have understood that I too was in their club. I just, I escaped with my life, but I had repressed all of that. And then of course, the fast rewind, like they would do in a movie, happens in my head. And I'm like, oh my God, I've been super modest. I had to have vaginal surgery. I thought it was something that was congenital, but it was probably scar tissue. Everything goes backwards. The first time I remember even kissing a boy, I just sort of like sat there. I didn't, because what was my experience as a tiny child? I just laid there. It also helps to explain why I have this mediumship ability to this level, because I disassociated. I left my body when it was happening, when the trauma was happening, to me as a child. So that was Yeah. So here I am. I'm trying to wrap my head around the fact that, oh my God, this is why. Okay. This answers the question of why. How do I help heal? How do I deal with this? And being a doer and a researcher, I thought, okay, hypnotherapy, ding. All right, check. I went and did that. Okay, therapy, ding, check. And I just felt like I was checking off boxes, but they were absolutely the wrong boxes to check off. I had no idea what the power of the subconscious and something that psychologists call wounded attachment. I had no idea. So with that, about 6 months after I came to this realization, things had been rocky with Scott and I, and there's been a lot of codependency on both sides, of our relationship. And he fully admits to being like, he was like, I was like this party dude, who was flying around as a business executive, coming home, hungover sometimes, even, and I'm saddled, here I got the kids, I got the furniture company, we went through a lot of stuff, a lot of financial devastation, a lot of layoffs. So we were putting on a good face, and people around us would say, oh, you guys are the best couple. And there was still a ton of love and respect there, but I know we knew something was broken. So with that said, in walks a man who is, unbeknownst to me at the time, a predator. And he swooped in, and if you know of the story Dirty John, that was it was a podcast and then was out there, in a series form. He was that type of person, sociopathic actually, who would come in and immediately kind of assess what the situation is. He was in the design world and said, I want to help you. I think you're amazing.
Furniture business. Yeah.
I was groomed. Groomed. And I fell headfirst for this person. And I thought to myself, oh, wow, this must be it, right? Because intuitively, I'm getting head to toe chills. I feel like I've known him for lifetimes, so it's unbelievable to me to think that
you probably have.
I have, right?
On some level.
Because I've had some folks have said, well, do you think those were warning signs? Like they're warning you, yet you were thinking they were. And I'm like, it was too strong. It wasn't a warning sign, because of course I know now that this was written in my life path, in order for me to go through. So I end up with this man. I said to Scott, I'm done. I need to get out. I'm done. And, it was very uncharacteristic of me, because this happened after a week of knowing him. Right. So everything is off kilter. Scott was devastated. He was like, what? Come on, let's go to therapy, please. I know things have been hard. Right. I was just like, nope, barreling ahead. So I ended up we separated. I ended up spending 3 years with this man. But the abuse started at 4 months, but I didn't recognize it as abuse. And so the irony of all of this is that, here I am working on cases that involve children who have been killed by predators. And I have one in my midst. Like, I'm that tapped into intuition, yet I still couldn't, that didn't overwhelm, I guess, the wounded attachment part too, Yeah. It's hard to reconcile, to be honest with you, in some ways, because I know this was part of my life and I needed to go through it, and it is for a bigger picture. And here I am telling my story. At the same time, could I have shortened the time period with my free will? Yes. Probably.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask about free will. Because it was, I had not read any books, or that's not, witnessing like a narcissistic relationship, an emotionally abusive relationship, is something that I've seen to that extent that profiled in your book. It's it was just astounding, like the repetition of some of the behaviors. And I was thinking, even with spirit having the intuition that you had, and you having access to this non-physical information, our free will is they're not going to override our free will. Right. And something that we need to experience, it's like it has to happen. Yeah. It's just something that has to happen. Like, they won't prevent it if it's a soul lesson, or if it will, we'll have a healing from it or something. Yeah. needs to be learned or released. You know, difficult as it may be, because I'm sure you've received questions like, well, why didn't the kids just tell you?
Right. And that was what was so fascinating. So here they are, they're still around me. There are a few that are always around me, as my guides too. I started to notice as I was going through those 3 years, the casework kids, the kids that I didn't know, that started to dwindle, because, here I'm basically living with a sociopath. Who ended up, I still get messages from women all over the world. I got one the other day who said, I need to tell you, I had a similar situation with him. So sociopath, empath, or narcissist and empath, right? It's a toxic world. But they knew enough they knew they couldn't spell it out. I probably wouldn't have even listened, to be honest with you. But I remember about 6 months in, one Jason, who is prominent in my book, he was 23 when he died of a heroin overdose. He came to me and he said, "This is not what it seems." And I thought, no, it's great. It's awesome. It's going to be even better than I think it's going to be, And so there were little tiny hints and clues, but by the end of it, Jason is saying, go get the restraining order now. Go do that. Do this part. You know exactly who he is. It wasn't until after I got out, so there were 3 of them, Carrie and Jason and Nate, really, who were popping in and out saying, this is not okay. Like, it's not okay, Kiersten. And honestly, they saved my life, because, my husband, we're back together. So that's the great part of the story. Scott and I are back together and have been since 2017, but they saved my life. And in some ways, I think they saved Scott's too, because, he talks about how, had we not gone through this was an intense 3 years. Had we not gone through it, I don't know if we would be here together now. And, he talks about all of this, the healing that happened on his end, and all of the growing up that happened on his end. And, that, I don't know if that would have happened. And I was a people pleaser, and, I had all these childhood wounds. And by standing up to the, abuse that I endured, by standing up to Tony as an adult, I was healing little Kiersten as a child.
It's just incredible. I mean, it's just so much goes on. It's like, we come in, our soul has a plan for us. Like, we want to have a certain experience, but it's up to us with our choices of how we're going to experience it.
Yes.
How we're going to arrive at whatever it is we need to learn, heal, or release. And it's like, not that anyone is saying, oh yeah, I want to have a difficult experience, but it is with growth and healing that you can look back and see what served.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
absolutely.
that how it all contributes to the becoming.
Yes. And, and I think, we obviously, I felt such shame, and I felt so horrible, and I would never want to put my family through that. Could I have done things differently when Scott and I, during the first part of our marriage, the first 18 years? Yes, I could have communicated more. I could, there's a lot of resentment that built up. We both could have done things differently. But what is also cool about this is that our kids saw us fight for each other. Our kids saw him fight for me. And he didn't even say, Kiersten, I knew he wanted to get back together, but he wasn't pressuring me. He wasn't doing any of that. He was just saying, it can't be him. You're going to die if you stay in this. And he was right. My hair was falling out. I mean, let alone after I got out of the situation, I was being threatened, and so there was a real life danger, but health-wise, there was a huge danger. I lost like 40 pounds. I was smoking, I was just a mess. And they saw him say to me, anyone but him, please, his
response was very, I was like, I don't even know what words to use to describe him. Like when I was reading the book and thinking, it was like, he is like an otherworldly person.
Yes.
Really, a normal person might be very angry, and I'm sure he was.
Oh, yeah.
Just the fact that he has some level of acceptance
Oh, yeah, big time.
situation to take place. I don't know, that was just astounding.
Yeah.
So we have children, furniture, narcissistic experience, wounded attachment, information coming up about your childhood. How has your life from the past, 13 years, how has these experiences changed your worldview?
I think it's strange to say that there is comfort in talking to the dead, but there is, because I think it gave me a viewpoint of what life is really about. And it gave me a view of, what I want to instill in my own kids, which is intuition is real. It is something that actually helped me survive life to this point. And, it's a roadmap. And so for me, I think it put everything into perspective. I don't fear death. I'm not ready to go, but I don't fear death. I know that my loved ones are around me. My grandma is here still kicking my butt, it's just making sure that I'm, on the right track. I love that. I love that.
Well, I felt a lot of love when you were just talking then, and I was thinking, this is just a beautiful, beautiful testament of how you can fall so far down and still have light, because you have so much light around you and coming through you that you're extending to the world now. It's just beautiful to see. The book does chronicle some difficult experiences, but we can look at you and see, that healing is possible no matter what.
Absolutely. It is possible.
Love remains.
Love remains. Absolutely. And thank you for that. I feel that way. And I think that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, because I just wanted to say, okay, I know we've all been through some hard stuff.
Yeah.
But, there really is light all around. There's light on the, other end of the tunnel. There's just light within us. And I think it's really important to share these messages, even about, what marriages are like, truly, right? We live in this Facebook world where everyone puts on this face, and there's real stuff going on behind all of this. The reasons that people fall into other relationships while they're still married, and it's not just a one-sided thing. It never is. It is interesting, because I feel like it's just a lot of nitty-gritty human stuff that I also tried to talk about while combining that with the stuff that happens on the other side.
This has been wonderful. It's just been wonderful. I just feel a lot of love coming to you right now. It's really, really nice. Well, we hope you enjoyed listening to this conversation with Kiersten Parsons-Hathcock. Little Visionaires is an independent bookstore that, beyond selling books, hosts community-focused interviews and author events. And remember, the best way to support your local independent bookstore is as simple as buying a book. While Kiersten's late in life mediumship ability is extraordinary, the wounds she buried that led her down a toxic path is simply a story many can relate to. Little Voices vividly inspires everyone to explore their own patterns, uncover their hidden pain, and trust their intuition in order to rise from the ashes. You can learn more at KierstenHathcock.com. Thank you, Kiersten.
Thank you so much for having me. This was wonderful.
It was.